Thank you
Cool.
so much for doing this, man. It really means a lot.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to do it.
Yeah, I've been watching you for quite a while, so yeah, no, it's really cool.
Oh, well, nice.
Um, right, do you want the questions so you can like look over them, or do you just want me to get
Oh
started?
no, you can surprise me. Just yeah,
Surprise
or
you?
do it however you want. And don't worry, yeah, however you want to record it and do it is good with me.
Okay, so okay, I'll just get right into it then. First on the bat, I kind of came up with this one like literally 5 minutes ago. I get notifications like constantly for your videos. So how are you able to like balance like working on your own projects and making so many kind of videos and like content for YouTube?
Oh, that's a good question. What I typically do is take a lot of the video ideas and the videos that I create come from stuff that I'm already working on. So a lot of the time I'm working on a project or working on coursework or something else, and I'll see something and I'm like, ah, this actually seems like it would have a wide, broad appeal and apply to, maybe more people than just this little group of people in a course or this, specific little project part. Maybe I can make a video out of it. And if it makes sense in my head and I'm like, oh yeah, I can make a video out of that and I can picture it all and it kind of comes together quickly, then I'll usually do it right away. And I'll just do it like while it's fresh on my mind, make a video about it really quickly instead of thinking about it and stewing on it or writing it down and planning it. I'll just go like, okay, this would be a great video. I'm either going to record it right now or the next second that I get a chance to record it. And then that's kind of the process. It keeps me going fast and nonstop. It also minimizes the amount of like editing and stuff that I end up doing,
Right.
but I try to just focus on the getting out the things that I think are going to be useful instead.
Yeah, because I saw the other day you actually posted a video how why game devs should make YouTube videos. Um, so I guess kind of making videos about what you're doing kind of solidifies the knowledge that you gain from doing projects, right? Like and like
Yeah,
portions of
because
projects.
without a doubt, and one of the things I've found that it does too is it makes you get a little bit better at it. It makes you want to have a deeper
Mm.
understanding and give you kind of like a reason to go like, oh, okay, what else does this method do, or what else does this API do, and why would I want to use it, or why am I using this thing over the other one? Because you know that these things are going to get asked as questions, and a lot of time you don't have to think about those in advance. Sometimes you just you start doing these things and you start making a video, you put it out there, and then somebody mentions a better way to do things or asks you why you do something some way, and you got to actually start thinking about it. And I feel like it makes you become a better developer when you have to go through and explain those things constantly.
Yeah. Heard you talking about like using APIs, and how do you feel about using like external tools created by others? Because I feel like, well, at least for me personally, there's like this big like kind of thing in my mind where I don't like using other tools because it almost feels like cheating in a way. Like, what is your kind of opinion on like using others like tools or creating your own like libraries or tools to help your workflow?
Yeah, I used to kind of think the same way and feel like it was cheating when I was using other people's stuff until I started realizing that I'm always using other people's stuff. It's just how much it's integrated into my workflow already versus me having to pull it in. Like pretty much always using a game engine now. I can't remember the last time I tried to build something from scratch without one. Even just going down to like a graphics API level and like, tree generation, navigation stuff. All of these things are problems that are already solved. I feel like it's better to spend your time working on the actual game that you want than to work on all of the little low level systems and those problems. But that said, there's always a risk of overusing somebody's
Mm.
systems and using something that forces you into a specific game design. So I think it's great to use systems that are out there that make your development faster, easier, and so you can focus on the core of your game. But you want to make sure that you're not designing your game or changing your game to match those systems just because they're what you have. Like, don't turn your RTS game into an RPG because you got some kit or, and that's obviously an extreme example, but
Yeah.
it happens a lot where people go like, hey, I got this pack, so now I'm going to start designing this in as part of the game when it had nothing to do with the game.
Yeah, because that's kind of like what I was saying before. How I kind of get scared of using other people's tools is like, what if they update the tool and it like deprecates a huge part of it, or it completely changes how one part of it works, and then I have to change like 10,000 lines of code. And that's like another 2 hours of work gone. But yeah, no, that's quite interesting. Yeah, because I've been using Unity for 5 years now, like when I was like 12. So, and it does get annoying when people like deprecate a huge part of something, and but it doesn't happen too often with a lot of the tools, but it's always a risk, I guess. Um, Especially when you use other things. But yeah, no, it's
It's
really
always
interesting.
nice when they give you extra updates though and just improve things without you having to do
Exactly.
stuff too.
Yeah. Um, okay, when did you start doing game development or programming, and what actually got you into it?
Ooh, I started programming when I was like 7 or something because I ran out of games to play in on my computer. It was a Commodore 64, and you could just the default, like when you booted up, was a command line. There was a coding environment, and you could just start typing code in there. Like right when you turned it on, you could just start writing code. So I would copy it out of magazines and stuff at first, and then started kind of figure out a little bit of how it worked and make my own really shitty little mini games. And then from then, I didn't actually start professionally programming until I was like 20 at Intel doing some stuff on engine. It was enterprise server stuff. And then from there went on to Sony. I got a call from a friend who worked at Sony asking if I wanted to come work there on some MMOs. And I said yes and went there. Worked on video games for a long time. And then it's been, I don't know, 20 some years. It's been a very long time now, but yeah, it was largely a desire to have more games and running out of games that got me going. I had 3 video games. I had pretty much beaten all 3 of them, and I couldn't afford any more because I was a little kid and games cost a lot of money.
Fair enough. You
I could afford a magazine and copy them out of the back though, and it would usually fuck it up. So I'd spend like hours typing it all in, and then it wouldn't work. I had no idea what any of it meant at first. So, some of it would be like assembly code too, and it'd be like writing in all these characters. Like I had no clue what's going on
Oh
here.
my God. You
Yeah.
mentioned MMOs. What MMOs did you work on? Were there any like big titles, or is it mostly small ones, or?
Vanguard and EverQuest 2 were the 2 main ones that I spent time working on. I played a lot of EverQuest 1, and my buddy that got me the job there worked on EverQuest 1 and Vanguard at first, and I think he worked on EverQuest 2 as well. Yeah, so it was those ones for like a good 7, 8 years. I don't know. It was a long time.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I'm not
And then
old
I got to
enough
do
to
a
know.
little bit of stuff for some of the other games over there.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm only 17. I'm not
Yeah,
old enough
it
to
was
know what
fun though.
Vanguard
It was
is.
a lot of fun. I met a lot of people there, a lot of game devs.
Yeah, yeah, I bet.
So what was that?
Sorry, there's a little bit of ping. But we'll manage. Yeah, I guess being in an industry where you're working with a lot of people, like you make a lot of connections, right? Like it's probably really good for your networking and stuff. Um, when you're
Yeah.
working in like a big company like that.
Oh, it's huge. I mean, you go to, especially if you're in an environment where you're working like in person, you're going out to lunch and hanging out with a bunch of different game developers of all different levels. You're hanging out with junior people that are hanging out with the CEOs and executives, and the designers and coders are all kind of getting together. You end up making a lot of friendships. Like you end up with just a lot of people that you know, and then those people go on. And a lot of the people that I knew back in the day, like doing QA stuff, are now, directors of big game departments and other things. Like you end up with a lot of connections, and I mean, you obviously lots of friends too that you just hang out with and still chat with, and we still go out to actually we've got I think a Disneyland trip planned coming up real soon again, meeting up with a bunch of them. So yeah, it's great for networking for sure.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to find jobs when you when you have a big network like that, or at least a lot easier, I should say. Maybe not very.
In your opinion, what separates a beginner from like an expert game developer? Is it like portfolio size, what work you've done, what companies you've worked for? What like is there like a clear boundary, or is it just kind of a skill uh like crossover?
I think it's just the ability to take something from start to finish. Like a junior developer, beginner, I don't expect them to be able to do that. I expect them to be able to contribute, add parts, go fix things, go add in some new system or go change something. But I don't expect them to be able to start the project from scratch, give it a good direction, and make sure that it actually gets finished. Where a senior developer should be able to do exactly that. It should be able to take like a concept of an idea and then turn that into a full product at the end. Obviously, the timeline may vary on, based on what that project is, but that's not the kind of thing that a junior developer would be expected to do. And they be expected to need a bit of hand holding and guidance on what types of things to do and have some room for growth there.
Right. Now I think I already know the answer to this one, but what is like the best way to transition from being what you call like a junior developer to a senior developer? Like what are the I'm assuming it's just to practice coding in general, and having experience, but is there any like I don't know, any tips that you can give for transitioning quicker for
Yeah,
people?
I mean, there are a couple things. One is you've got to be learning a lot. You've just got to be constantly like looking into and investigating different ways to do things and new ways and better ways to do things than what you're doing right now. Which I think one of the best things that you can do with that is just start showing code to other people, other more senior developers, and getting their honest feedback. Let them kind of tear it apart and tell you all of the ways that they would do it different, not just how to make it better, but just say, like, here's how I did this. How would you do it if you were going to do it? And then let them explain the differences in mindset and the way that they might put it together. And do that with more than one person because you could end up with bad advice if you just go to a single person on that kind of stuff. And then also go through and just kind of what you said, practice, but practice by building projects from start to finish. Keep them scoped so that they're easy enough that you can actually finish them. Don't scope them into something that has to be some big, huge, successful game. Just think of them as a game. Like the success is that the game is done, it works all the way through, the gameplay loop is good, and it's done and released. It doesn't have to be, we get a thousand concurrent players or even 100 players. It just has to be a full game. Go through that process a couple times. You'll run into all of the different issues that come up when you're building a game, and you'll grow a lot really, really fast doing that because you'll start to see these problems, you'll find a solution to them, and then you'll fix them. You'll start to see what happens when you don't pay attention to performance and you try to release a game and it goes out to mobile, and suddenly there's a big issue. And then you see how easy it is to fix. You're like, okay, if I just make these couple little changes, then I don't won't have these problems. And you kind of learn those things as you're going. If you're doing it all as part of a big project and part of a big team, it's a lot harder to see those things and get that growth. Plus, you're kind of confined down on what you're doing when you're in the bigger side. So, like while you're working on stuff for work, just do a little bit of side projects and try to get a couple things out.
Mm.
Sort of do, and they don't have to be games. They could be tools or apps for your games or whatever else.
Speaking about performance, you just mentioned it in there. How like personally, I have a real issue with I don't really understand how the batch system works in Unity, and I end up having like 10,000 batches, and like my game runs like awfully. Like what is the best way to like remove batches or improve performance in projects? Because like do you have like a few tips and tricks for removing like large amounts of batches or usage?
Yeah, there's well, it varies a lot based on like the render pipeline and the setup and what's causing the problems. The easiest and simplest thing you can do on a lot of things is if you're just having a ton of the same object, just make sure that GPU instancing is actually turned on for those. You can turn it on the it's like a where's it, on the material somewhere in the standard material setting. You down at the bottom,
Mm,
you can turn on GPU instancing. It'll drop a lot of those for scenarios where you've got like just a shitload of the same object instance at different sizes and scales, and it's not patching those. Making sure that the static stuff is actually marked as static will drop that down drastically too. Um, Other than that, I don't know. It's hard to give general advice, and I'm like graphics part is probably my weakest area too. So
mm.
general graphics advice, I'm not the best with.
All
But
good.
those are kind of the core things. I say making sure that anything that actually is static isn't moving around during your in your scene. Make sure that those are actually marked as static for batching, and then the GPU instancing is on those things that are getting replicated out. Also, I mean, obviously just minimizing things like the number of materials that you're using. If you can share materials across objects, that's why you see in a lot of games, they're just color palettes that get reshared or texture sets that get reshared and materials that get shared across different objects constantly. And yeah, just minimizing those. Trying to think. There are probably some other things, but maybe I'll do a little bit of research and come up with a full video on just some rendering optimization ideas.
Mm. So design is obviously a super important part of the process of creating a game. Coming up with an initial idea, designing mechanics, levels, and I personally feel like I go into too much detail. Do you have any like sort of guide to save time earlier on designing things that will most likely need to be designed or altered later in the project?
Well, first off, I'll say that I hate doing actual game design. I don't hate it, but I feel like it's my weakness. Like the code part is easy and
Oh
simple.
yeah.
It's all nice and logical. With design, I feel like it's always like this magical, I've got to try to figure stuff out that I don't really know what I'm doing there. But when I am doing design stuff, I try to keep everything as modular as possible and as easy to change so that I can just modify it at runtime while I'm going through and trying things out. Because for me, like I just feel like I need to figuring out how high to jump or how much damage something should do. Like I can see it in charts. I know like I got friends who can like see it in an Excel sheet and just be like, oh yeah, that's perfect. This needs to change a little bit, but I need to actually see it in game. So having those things as scriptable objects that I can modify at runtime so I can just kind of balance them out and change it helps a lot. And then when it comes to like level design and stuff, I try to stick with very basic objects because I found that when I try to do something pretty, first, I suck at making pretty levels, but second, it ends up messing with my design and making it a lot harder to work with once I've pulled in a bunch of art and stuff. So I'll usually do the level design with just some flat graphics and what I'll use, and I won't just use cubes because like white cubes drive me nuts, but I'll pull in like a cartoon texture pack or something and I'll use those and I'll have like little stone cubes or something like that so that I'm not just staring at a gray and white room because that makes me insane. But like I try to keep it as simple as possible so it's easy to change. But the key thing that I do, like I said, is make all of the data adjustable at runtime so that I can adjust everything at least as much as possible at runtime and test out that design without having to go back and forth constantly.
Right. What online learning resources do you find to be the most helpful in allowing people to learn game development? Do tutorials work, or is there some better way you've found which helps people more? Obviously including your channel in this, but
Yeah, when it comes to learning just basic game development and the fundamentals, I feel like you can get a lot of that from some YouTube tutorials, just a couple of them that go through and take you for a couple hours. You just find a few of those and you can get through, I think, the fundamentals of how to build like a Flappy Birds or Angry Birds or something similar, a little shooter or something like that. and you can kind of figure that out on your own. And I feel like personally, what I recommend is that you go through a couple of those from different people and see what their styles are like and what they're teaching, because everybody's going to teach things a little bit different. Some people will show some things and not other things, and some people will do things in a great way, and other people will do other things in a great way. And there's always like some variance, right, on what's there. So I would go through a couple of them, 4 or 5 different people's beginner tutorials, see what they're like, see what you can build. And then from there, what I found for like longer term learning, a couple good things. Obviously, the YouTube videos are great, and just keeping up with educational stuff, and you see something interesting, then go check it out. I mean, a lot of time though with those, you really just want to check out the things that are somewhat relevant to whatever it is you're working on, or that might be relevant to what you're working on. That if you just go watch random videos about every little thing out there, it's probably not going to be that helpful. Watching some architectural videos can be helpful. You just have to be careful not to go crazy and try to over apply architectural rule principles when they're not needed, because a lot of times when you're looking at those videos, talking in the context of a large scale game that maybe has thousands of active players, or a lot of them are talking about a website that's got millions of active users, and that's the scale that they're thinking of. And they're thinking of, we've got 10 years of development and improvement going on with this, or this is a live MMO that's going to be around for 20 years. So you got to think about those things a little bit differently, and just make sure not to go overboard with them. For resources though, sorry, going a little off track.
All good.
Other than that, I think online courses can be good. I've obviously got my own at game.courses. And then the Game Dev TV ones are pretty good. There's lots of online courses out there that you can check out, but I would go through all the free stuff first. Don't, you can learn most of the stuff for free. And then when you're at the point where you're like, hey, I'm kind of stuck trying to figure out what to learn, then go to that, because you can figure out. I feel like you can figure out all of the beginner stuff pretty simple on your own. The Unity page is pretty good. Unity Learn is pretty decent for specific resources. For that, I found it's useful when you want to like go learn a specific thing. Like how do I deal with navigation? How do I deal with universal render pipeline, or set up this one thing or another thing. They have a couple beginner tutorials too, and then I'd say best and most useful thing that you can do is start getting into some game dev communities. And it doesn't have to be like a big commitment. It can just be joining Discord servers at first, and maybe listening in on the chat, and then occasionally asking questions, and maybe answering questions if you happen to think you might know the answer or have an idea of what the answer could be. Start reaching out and kind of making those contacts, because you're going to find that when you when you run into problems and stuff, you can just start reaching out to those contacts and those people and those channels. And one of the sorry, this is going to be a long answer.
That's
So
all good.
from those, you can also join up with other developers and form mastermind groups, which I think are great, where game devs, or it's not only game devs, but in this context, game developers meet usually like once a week, talk to each other about what it is they're working on, the things that they're stuck with, the problems that they're having, and then kind of help each other through. Usually groups of around like 4 devs meet once a week and go through those problems. They work great. I know a ton of people in mastermind groups that have had multiple of my own, and it's amazing for just getting stuff done and getting past problems, and having a group of people that really understand what you're working on and understand the context. So they know what your project is when you come with a problem, and they know what you've been doing for the last 2 years on that project. And it helps a lot of people get stuff done. The final thing, if you're totally antisocial too, is just using some AI. So you can use things like ChatGPT, Google's new Gemini. Writer's AI is really good too, built into the code editor. Those are great for problems, although I feel like if you're at the beginner level, it's a little bit, it may not be the best option, because it lies enough and confuses you enough that you will probably get lost. If you ask it questions and you don't know if it's telling the truth, then it's a problem. So I would say that's great for like the more intermediate level. When you want to try to figure things out and you're just not quite sure, ask it and then verify because at this point, you know, it's great for figuring things out if you're not sure how to do it. When it gets the answer right. It sucks when it gets the answer wrong and you don't know it. Luckily, as you get more experience, though, you can kind of recognize you're like, that is definitely not right. Like that's Unity 3 code, like, whatever. That's a lot of what I see. It's like that is literally like a web controller that has nothing to do with Unity stuff or something. And I'm like, because I recognize that. But if you're brand new to code, you're like, oh yeah, this is an controller. What is this? Okay.
You actually unintentionally seamlessly transitioned into the next question, which is on AI. So that's really
Oh,
helpful.
okay.
Um, so it is becoming a very prevalent kind of topic of discussion in pretty much all industries these days. Where do you think AI, ChatGPT, or text or image based AI models have a spot in the industry? Because like you said, they do pump out incorrect information quite a lot. So like, is there any is there any other kind of use cases that you've found or know of that people could implement into their projects other than getting help?
Oh yeah. I mean, first off, it's just making the tools drastically faster. Like I use JetBrains Writers AI, or I use Copilot too, but I've been going back and forth, and I've been on JetBrains for the last couple weeks, and it's just great for speeding things up. I was just showing people earlier today, like if I want to write out a class and I already have some semblance of that class somewhere else, a lot of the time I will just type like one word, hit tab and enter, then hit tab and enter, and it's just auto completing every next line, and it knows exactly what I want to do. And it's saving me, it might not seem great, but it's saving me all that time of the repetitiveness of like oh crap, now I got to go do this for 10 different things or even 4 different things. Now it's like, oh, I go right past that and continue on. And it's kind of letting me keep in context more so I can speed through things quite a bit faster. Again, it does occasionally just like randomly recommend something stupid. And I'm like, nope. But if you don't recognize that, it would be a problem. But on the other side, like the image and video stuff, I don't know what's going to happen with the video generation. It's still kind of new, but I feel like it's going to change some things. I don't know what that's going to do with games, though. I know they're working with using like Unreal and having it be able to simulate Unreal. That could be very interesting long term. I feel like it's still many years away from like, practical use. The image stuff is pretty practical now, though. Like generating textures is pretty common and works really well. Generating UI stuff, generating logos, nice and simple, like generating concept art. It's making a big impact on the I guess like less funded side of game devs. Like all the people that couldn't afford a lot of those things can now kind of get access to some of those things. It's also kind of hurting some of the game developers who do that stuff, like concept artists, obviously getting hurt a bit, voice actors. Like I feel like that's a field that's going to quickly just dry up and disappear. It's going to be, just a couple famous ones, and the idea of being a voice actor on Fiverr or something is pretty much going to disappear because we're almost to the point where you can just have it generate anything, and it's going to be similar to that for things like logos, icons, UI elements and all of that in the near future. I feel like a lot of those like common things will be AI generated, and then eventually humanoid characters and other characters and things like that will turn that way. So it's going to be a not very slow, but somewhat slow process of transition where a lot of these things that were made by individual people are now going to be just generated, which I think, it's obviously sucks for those people, but it's good for everybody that's getting the generated stuff. So it's a terrible, terrible trade-off, like any other new technology, right? Like some people will suffer and other people will benefit from it. Hopefully people don't suffer too much, though. And the art, I mean, to be honest, like my AI generated art stuff is terrible compared to what an artist could do. But so but I only use it for things where I was never gonna pay somebody anyway because it was just not economically viable.
Yeah, right. Uh, yeah, I've used it I've used a few AI tools. One of them, like you said, textures. One called I think with Poly or something was really good, and that was super helpful when I was doing a lot of Blender work. For one of my personal projects, that was a really helpful tool. Um, but yeah, super interesting, eh?
Yeah, and then there's also the story side of it too, like AI generated stories. I think that those are somewhat interesting, especially for people who don't particularly like writing stories and have like a loose idea of a story and want to be able to turn it into something. I think it's a great assistant for that and being able to put things together. And like mass generated, just generic AI stories probably not the most exciting, but having NPCs that you can speak with and give context to and have them act more natural and human, I think that that is good. Obviously, if it's just like, walk up to it and it's just a chat GPT direct interface, that's not that exciting. We've already seen that, but I think that there are a couple of people working on setups where the AI kind of acts more human and acts actually like or human like or alive. So they're doing things not just responding to text, but kind of acting through that brain too. It's gonna be interesting to see how that all works out. But I've been watching a lot of Star Trek lately with the holodecks and yeah, it's I don't know. Well, I'm excited, but a little scared too. We'll see.
I don't
Something always goes wrong on those holodecks, and then some evil thing takes it over. So, yeah.
I don't want to hold you up for too much longer because it's oh my god, it's already been 30 minutes. Um, there's two fun questions now, and then that's all that I have. What has been your favorite project you've worked on and why, and what made it interesting?
Ooh, my favorite project. Well, I guess the favorite one that I ever worked on was probably that Vanguard, the MMO at Sony, which was at Sigil originally, and that was just because I really liked the game before. Like before I started working on it, I was a huge fan of the game. I liked playing it a lot. I was kind of addicted. And when I got to work on it, I learned a ton. I learned all about databases, all about multiplayer networking, all my C++ and Unreal stuff. I got to learn a ton of stuff working on that project and really grow as a developer at that time. So that was yeah, that was definitely my favorite. I even got to do design stuff. I got to design my own raids. I got to write the code to enable designing my own raids so that it was easier and I could do things that the other designers couldn't do. I was like, oh yeah, why don't we add this and this and this? It's always great. That's something that I think is important too. Having, and this is a bit of a tangent, but having very good design to programming communication and also art to programming communication makes a huge difference in the team's productivity because there's usually a lot of things, especially as the teams grow, there's usually a lot of things that either art or design are doing that are very slow, tedious, and terrible, where the programming side can look at it and if they just knew it was happening, they can spend 15 minutes and like, save hundreds of man hours of work constantly. It's a very, very common thing. I saw it constantly. And it happens more as the teams grow. It's like as the teams get bigger and bigger and bigger, the people who are doing the tedious work are now reporting up to somebody who's then talking to the programmer who or the lead of the programmers and like that direct communication. Without that, you end up with a lot of bad bottlenecks and a lot of easy opportunity to fix things. So make sure that your programmers are doing a little bit of design stuff and integrated in there, or that they're doing a little bit of art stuff, and that you're gonna keep those things, keep those teams tightly knit.
Yeah, I just started my software engineering course yesterday. Actually, I had my first class. And but so I'm focusing on game development in my course, and a big thing they said is that the artists are gonna learn some of the technical stuff, and the programmers will learn some of the art stuff, just so everyone is kind of able to understand every part of the project and not be confused about what people are working on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's super important. Having that cross communication makes a big difference, and you can remove giant bottlenecks very easily a lot of the time.
Hmm. Right, my end question. I don't know if you have any questions or any extra things to add, but my end question is, what is like your biggest, most critical piece of advice for game developers, either beginner or like a seasoned developer?
Ooh, let me think. I think I have too many of them. That's the problem. Nailing it down to just one. I guess first for the beginners, just make sure that you're building and releasing things and don't end up with a giant crazy scope creep where you just build something that's or try to build something that's too big and makes you give up or makes you just delay it and put it off constantly. If a project is seeming daunting and too big, it probably is, especially if it's your first project. And you should go with and create a bunch of smaller things, get a bunch of stuff done out there and released. On the more senior side, I mean, when it comes to the engineering part, just make sure that you're actively learning and researching new stuff. And that doesn't have to be like a job task. A lot of things I do is just like listening to podcasts, joining random like webinars that Unity or Epic will put on and just have them kind of playing in the background, and occasionally I'll pick up new things. In fact, that's usually what happens. Is I'll come across like, oh wait, what was that? And I'll just go back and rewind it because they said something that was interesting, and I'll pick up a new tip or a new tool or something like that. Like Parsec was one that I picked up like 6 months ago just from watching this on the tooling side. Amazing tool. I use it every single day now, and I just happened to see it on one of those webinars of other developers talking about what they were doing. I got some code stuff from there too, but they don't apply to everyone. The Parsec one does. And then the other part is for the senior devs, make sure that you're talking to other developers and sharing what you're doing, showing your code. Don't be afraid to just show your code, even though it sucks, because almost everybody thinks that their code sucks most of the time. So don't be afraid to show it and then have people, give you feedback. Sometimes people will be terrible about it, but most of the time people are going to give you pretty good positive advice. Even the ones that are terrible about it usually have some little nugget of good advice in there. So make sure you're sharing it, get it out there, go to events like meetups and maybe join some online channels, Discord channels and stuff, but definitely go to meetups and events and talk to other devs, get out there. It'll help a lot long term with your career, just being able to know and get in to other positions. Number one thing is networking and knowing people, and it makes it a lot more fun if you're showing your stuff off to other people. And even if you're just going to a meetup once a month and you guys are talking about whatever the projects are that you're working on, and you start to make friends and build up a bunch of connections there, it makes the whole process a lot better. So that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm done. Do you have any like closing kind of words? What do you got?
Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment down below.
I'll put a link to your channel, even though I don't have that big of a following, and I'll put a link to all the stuff, all the places that all the websites and stuff that you said throughout throughout the video as well.
Nice.
Yeah, awesome.
Cool.
Thank you
All
so
right, man.
much, man.
Cool.
You have
Yeah,
yourself
no,
a
it was good
wonderful
talking to you.
rest of your day.
You too.